How's it going, guys? Wanted to talk about the current MMA scene, particularly what's going on with several fighters. Um, if you will, they're fighting it out with UFC. Dana White talking about their pay. You know, a lot of them are arguing for better pay, more compensation. We got, high profile fighters like Jon Jones, Jorge Masvidal. What's the other one? Henry Cejudo. Henry Cejudo retires. And he says that, basically he wanted to retire on top. But if he probably wouldn't be retiring if the pay was better. Jorge Masvidal says that he's getting paid. UFC wants to pay him less for the title fight against Usman, less than what he got paid when he fought Nate Diaz back in New York. So there's a lot of moving parts to consider, a lot of things going on. First of all, the situation's not normal circumstance, and I'm guessing in part this plays out why they're doing this right now. In a way, taking advantage, and that's not in a negative connotation. There are things that in life where you have to time things, and it's a good time for UFC to realize and to understand the value of their high-profile fighters. In a way, this is Jon Jones, Jorge Masvidal. These are two fighters that, in a way, for lack of a better term, they're coming of age as far as reflection. They're understanding that, the fight game isn't forever. The fight game, MMA, is a young man's sport. It really is. Jorge Masvidal has come to a high-profile notoriety, even more so now. After the knockout, after he knocked out in formidable fashion Ben Askren with that knee. It was a few seconds knockout that elevated his profile, his MMA profile, big time. Jon Jones realizes also that he's not a young man anymore, as at least not in MMA years, not as an MMA fighter. He is young, he's young as fuck, but he's been through wars. He's been through a lot of wars in the UFC. He gets a lot of accolades as the greatest of all time. But when it comes down to it, he's reflecting. He's, just like all of us reflect where we are, if you're going to turn 40, if you're going to turn 50, or if you're going to even turn 20, and you understand and you see yourself where you're at. And some of us hold jobs and we get high on that age and we say, why am I still doing this? Why is this, is this where I should be? And I think that's what Jon Jones and Jorge Masvidal are realizing right now. That they've done so much. They sweat so much blood and tears to say, and they had wars in the octagon, in the MMA sport. And they're not really rich. Maybe they're doing well, because obviously it would be a crime if they weren't doing well, but they could be doing a lot better. Here's UFC. You gotta look at it from two sides. Here's UFC, and you can look at this from the UFC perspective. As a business, they do what they have to do to stay successful. and they give these fighters contracts, and the fighters fight these contracts. But the situations change. This discussion has been going on by pundits and by professionals for a while now, and I've been observing, and I understand, and I always thought that the fighters, a lot of UFC fighters, most of the UFC fighters, I would say 90% of the UFC fighters are underpaid for the wars they go through, for the shows they put out there, the fights, they promote themselves basically. Most of the times, at least in the last 5 years, the matchmaker doesn't make matches, they make their own matches. They start a little wars on Twitter with the other fighter, and maybe a little confrontation backstage, things like that. And these fighters, that's how they get fights. That's how they gotten fights so far. And then they make the matchmaker at UFC's job easier, because at least, they plant the seeds. So UFC on their side, they do whatever they have to do. They dish out them contracts, and the fighters sign them. But then later on, the situations change, and the fighters come out shortchanged. Basically, they're not. At least in Jon Jones, Jon Jones should be out there as his profile. And I know it's not UFC's fault. I mean, a lot of it is his fault. He's been in the news for the wrong reasons. He's been in the news for, as taking PEDs. He's got busted and suspended several times. He's gotten in trouble with the law so many times. He has a personal problem. When he's outside the ring, he doesn't handle things too well. He doesn't do well with a lot of free time, you could say. With that said, the man's a genius when he's in the ring. He's an outstanding fighter. So smart, so athletic. He adapts. He has faced every opponent you could think of in the ring. And maybe he's already rich, but right now he's realizing that he could be richer. He could be a billionaire, maybe not a billionaire, but he could have a lot more millions that he missed out because when he was young, he didn't give it a thought. He didn't understand that one day he was gonna get older, and he was not gonna want to fight anymore. And if he takes a high profile fight, for example the Ngannou fight that he wanted to take, go up in heavyweight, face a monster like Ngannou who hits like a tank, and here's UFC, they're not gonna pay him well for taking such a risk. And the amount of money UFC would make with such a pay-per-view, with such a fight, would be amazing. Who wouldn't want to see that fight? So I see Jon Jones' point of view. I mean, UFC would make millions of dollars with that fight. So it's a crime when Dana White or UFC shortchange them and tells them, I'm not gonna pay you a certain amount of money, or alludes to that, don't dream about, boxing salaries, because that's not who we are. And then I get the frustration from Jon Jones. So I think that is very interesting. It's very interesting the way he's handling things. I do believe him when he says he would rather leave the company than continue being underpaid. I think UFC is gonna do a good job of fixing it up and mending things, at least with him. So we'll see where that goes. But I do see Jon Jones' point of view, and I think he's making a good move. Maybe it's not the best timing for UFC because with the pandemic going on, but it is the best timing for Jon Jones. And ultimately, Jon Jones has to look out for himself. He has to look out for number one. The same with Jorge Masvidal. He's right. A title fight against Usman, who is a very risky fight. Usman is a wrestler. He's very dominant. He's a champion for a reason. And Jorge Masvidal has worked his way up to that title shot. How are you going to tell him that he's going to make less money on the title fight than the last fight he had, where he won? It just doesn't make sense. So UFC stands to, they never lose, which is what happens with companies that are successful. They find ways of never losing, never come out in the losing side. But Jorge Masvidal is looking at it the smart way. He wants to make that money. I'm going to close by saying that, young fighters, you guys that are young, you guys that are, going to be fighters, or you're already fighting, or want to become fighters, and you're 19, 20, 21, 22, and you have that talent, you have that star power. Before you sign that contract, look at yourself in 5 years, and what happens if you're going to be successful? What happens if you're going to be the face of UFC at that time? You got to be smart. At the end of the day, you got to look out for yourself. UFC is going to look out for UFC. You got to look out for you, your benefits, your family, your future, where, the damage you're going to take, the camp, the blood and tears that you're going to spill working hard, training hard, and facing all these other tough competitors in UFC or Bellator or wherever it is that you're at. Make sure you get paid, that you get paid your worth. If you're talented, and if you're bringing in those viewers and putting those butts in their seats, man, get paid for it. Don't get shortchanged. Look at what fighters, there's a lot of fighters I can name that ended up broke. They're old and they're still fighting. Maybe they weren't smart with their money, but at the same time, maybe they weren't smart with the contracts they were signing. Anyways, thank you for listening to me. I just wanted to vent a little bit and, talk about the situation with these fighters and what's going on. I'm not going to talk about Conor, because Conor's kind of put himself in the same picture, but he's different. Look at Conor. Conor's very smart. He handled his business very smart, and there's a lot of good things that you can pick up from the way Conor handles things, as far as money and getting that money and getting paid. Thank you guys. Let me know what you guys think, your opinions, likes, dislikes. Thanks for listening to me.